Sometimes silence is not peace. It's what follows after the screaming stops. The house stood on the edge of the hill like a thought someone forgot to finish. It wasn't old enough to be a ruin, not new enough to feel alive. The paint was the color of dry bone, and the windows caught the light in a way that made them look wet, like eyes that had just cried. Clara Bennett didn't believe in ghosts. She said that a few times out loud as the removal truck left her standing on the gravel path, the engine fading down the slope. "I don't believe in ghosts," she whispered again. Still, she didn't move for a minute. The air felt heavy, too still for an early autumn morning. Her children were waiting in the car, Lily, age 9, and Samuel, 6. They'd fallen silent for the last part of the drive, ever since the road turned narrow and swallowed them into a tunnel of trees. Clara had told them the same thing she told herself. This was a new start, a quieter life, a safe place. But quietness can hide many things. "Come on," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. "Let's see our new home." The front door opened with a sigh, as though the house had been holding its breath. Inside, the smell was not dust, not mold, but something colder, like wet iron. Clara told herself it was just the pipes. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with wallpaper that had once been white. A single mirror hung near the stairs, covered by a sheet. The removal men had forgotten to take it down, or maybe it had always been there. The children followed behind her, small shadows in the gloom. They were pale from the car ride, from the months before that. Too many doctors, too much waiting. Both of them were sensitive to light. Direct sunlight gave them rashes and nosebleeds, so the curtains in every room would stay drawn. That was the rule. No sunlight. "Can we open the windows, Mum?" Lily asked. "Not yet," Clara said quickly. "We'll get the shades fixed first." There was silence then, a kind that didn't feel empty but crowded, like something was listening. Clara found the kitchen cleaner than she expected, though the refrigerator hummed with a low, broken sound. The house had been left fully furnished by the previous owners, who'd moved away, suddenly. The real estate agent had said it with a little laugh, but wouldn't say more. There was a note on the counter, written in careful, slanted handwriting. "If the doors close on their own, leave them that way. They open again when it's safe." She frowned. What a strange thing to write. She folded the paper and pushed it into a drawer. By evening, the house seemed almost calm. Boxes were half unpacked. Samuel was drawing on the floor, Lily reading near the lamp. Outside, fog had started to rise from the valley below, moving like something alive through the trees. Clara turned on the radio for company. It crackled, caught half a sentence of an old song, then died again. She found herself staring at the mirror in the hall. The sheet still hung over it, the fabric shifting slightly as if something breathed behind it. She almost reached to uncover it, but stopped. "Tomorrow," she said aloud. "Tomorrow, I'll make this house ours." That night, the silence thickened. At 2 a.m, Clara woke to the sound of footsteps above her, soft, even ones, pacing the upstairs hallway. She lay still, holding her breath. The children's room was up there. She waited. The steps paused, then started again, slower this time. Clara got up. The hallway light flickered when she switched it on, humming like an insect. She climbed the stairs, each step complaining under her weight. The door to the children's room was slightly open. "Lily?" "Sam?" No answer. She pushed the door open. Both children were asleep in their beds, faces pale in the moonlight seeping through the curtains. The room was cold, much colder than downstairs. Clara went to close the window, but it was already locked. She could see her reflection faintly in the glass, or thought she could. The shape behind it didn't quite match her movement. She turned off the light and stepped back into the hall. The mirror at the far end of the corridor was uncovered now. She froze. She didn't remember touching it. The next morning, the children complained that they'd heard whispering in their room. Clara told them it was the wind. She said it with such certainty that for a moment she almost believed it. At breakfast, Samuel asked, "Mum, who was the lady in the hall?" Clara looked up sharply. "What lady?" "The one who was talking to you last night." "I was alone, sweetheart." Samuel frowned. "She said she lived here first." Lily nudged him. "Stop it, Sam." But his little face stayed serious, eyes fixed on the kitchen door. By afternoon, the fog had come closer, pressing against the house like a gray wall. The world outside the windows was gone. Only the faint outline of the trees remained. Clara called the local maintenance man to check the heating. He said he'd come tomorrow. "That house up there?" he muttered on the phone. "Some folks say it's best left cold." She almost laughed, but it stuck in her throat. That night she dreamed of someone knocking on the door, gently, 3 times. When she woke, her hand was already reaching for the handle, and the door was slightly open. Outside, the fog was waiting. The morning came gray and soundless. The fog hadn't lifted. It pressed against the windows like a hand that didn't want to let go. Clara woke to the ticking of the hallway clock, steady, soft, almost kind, but each tick sounded a little too close, like it was inside her head. She sat up and saw that Samuel was already awake, standing by the doorway in his pajamas. "Did you hear it again?" she asked quietly. He nodded without looking at her. "She was walking last night." "The lady." Clara tried to keep her voice calm. "That's enough, Sam. It was just the pipes, or maybe the house settling." He turned to her then. His eyes looked strange in the dim light, too old, too knowing. "She said she doesn't like the doors being open." Clara's stomach tightened. "What doors?" "The one at the end of the hall. The one you locked." There was, in fact, a locked room at the end of the upper hallway. Clara had noticed it when they moved in, a narrow wooden door with a tarnished brass knob that wouldn't turn. She assumed it led to an attic or a storage space, but the real estate agent hadn't mentioned it. After breakfast, while the children played quietly, she went upstairs to check. The door was there, plain as ever, with a faint line of cold air seeping from the edges. She pressed her ear against it. Nothing. Just silence. Too deep, like the sound was being swallowed. She tried the knob again. Still locked. On a whim, she fetched the old keys from the kitchen drawer. A ring the agent had left her with no labels. She tried each one by one, until the smallest key slid in with a reluctant click. The door opened. The room smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. It was small, square, with a single window covered in thick black fabric. A chair sat in the corner facing the wall. On the floor, a Bible lay open, the pages yellowed and curling. The strangest thing was the dust, or rather, the lack of it. Everywhere else in the house, the furniture was coated with a thin gray film, but here the surfaces were clean, as if someone had been dusting. Clara stepped inside carefully. Her own breath felt too loud. She reached for the black curtain, meaning to pull it aside, but a sudden cold shot up her arm, like static through her bones. She froze. For a moment she thought she heard breathing. Not hers. Then the floorboard behind her creaked. She turned sharply. No one. The door had drifted almost shut. She backed out, closed it firmly, and locked it again. Her hand was shaking. Downstairs, the children had gone quiet again. Lily was sitting near the radio, turning the knob back and forth even though it wasn't plugged in. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" Clara asked. "I'm listening," Lily said simply. "To what?" "The voices. They're trying to talk through the noise. Sam says they used to live here." "Stop that." Clara's tone came out harsher than she meant. "No more stories, all right? It's just static." But Lily didn't look up. She whispered, "They said the light hurts them too." Clara felt a cold pulse of fear deep in her chest. "What did you just say?" "The light," Lily repeated. "They said it burns." The maintenance man came that afternoon. He was older, gray-haired, with a face lined like dried riverbeds. He walked slowly through the house, touching the walls like he was feeling for a pulse. When he reached the upstairs hall, he stopped. "You said this house was empty before you moved in?" he asked. "Yes," Clara said. He nodded once, not looking at her. "Well, I'd keep the windows covered if I were you." Clara frowned. "Because of the kid's condition?" His eyes flicked toward the end of the hall, toward the locked room. "Because of the house's condition." She tried to laugh it off, but he didn't. He tightened a few bolts on the radiator, mumbled something about faulty wiring, then left quickly, refusing the tea she offered. From the window, she watched his truck vanish into the fog, as though swallowed whole. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The radio in the kitchen kept turning itself on, a low hum, a whisper of music. Once, when she went to unplug it, she noticed her reflection in the dark window. Only it wasn't just her. For a second, there was someone behind her, a faint pale outline. Too tall to be either of the children. She spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. The shadows soft and quiet. She touched her own face, suddenly unsure of its shape. The next morning, Lily refused to get out of bed. Clara sat beside her, brushing her hair gently. "What's wrong, honey?" "I don't want to go in the hall." "Why not?" "She's waiting there." "The lady in the dark dress." Clara's voice trembled before she could stop it. "Where did you see her?" "By the locked door." She was crying. Clara decided then she would open that door again, just to prove it was empty. She waited until the children were napping, then took the key from her pocket and climbed the stairs. The hallway was dim. The clock at the far end had stopped ticking. The air smelled faintly of dust and something sweet, almost like perfume. She unlocked the door. It opened easier this time, like the room had been expecting her. Inside, the chair had turned. It now faced the doorway. On the seat was a photograph, old, sepia-colored, edges curled with age. A family stood in front of the house, a mother, 2 children, and a tall man in uniform. The woman's face looked almost exactly like Clara's. For a long time, Clara just stared. Then she whispered to the empty room, "Who are you?" From somewhere, maybe the corner, maybe inside her own head, came the faintest answer, like breath over glass. "You know us." The light flickered once. Then the door slammed shut on its own. The house felt different after the door slammed. Not louder, not colder, just aware. Every sound, every breath, every tick of the clock seemed to be listened to. Clara didn't tell the children about the photograph. She hid it in her bedside drawer, though sometimes at night she swore she heard the paper sliding softly against the wood, as if someone were touching it from the inside. For 2 days, she tried to live normally. Breakfast at 8, lessons with Lily at 10, a bit of drawing with Sam after lunch. But the fog outside never lifted, and by the 3rd morning, Clara couldn't tell if it was still day or if the night had come early again. Lily stopped speaking much. She would stand near the covered windows and tilt her head, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. When Clara asked what she was doing, Lily would just whisper, "They're moving again." "Who is?" "The ones in the other rooms." "There are no other rooms," Clara said. "We're alone here." Lily turned toward her, eyes pale and strange. "Mum, what if we're the others?" That evening, Samuel began to draw. He used the back of old receipts, napkins, anything he could find. He drew the house again and again, always from the outside, always in fog. But in every drawing, there were faces in the windows. Not clear faces, just pale shapes with hollow eyes. "Who are these?" Clara asked, trying to sound calm. He looked up from his paper, voice small. "They're watching us." The next day, Clara found the locked room open again. She hadn't used the key. She was sure of that. Inside, the air was colder than before. The Bible was gone. The chair was gone too. On the wall, written in pale chalk, were words barely legible. "Don't turn on the light." She stepped back, heart hammering. At that same moment, a crash echoed from downstairs, glass breaking. Clara ran down, calling for the children. In the kitchen, the mirror over the sink had shattered, shards glittering on the floor like ice. The radio was on again, hissing and whispering in fragments. Amid the static, a faint woman's voice repeated, "They shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be here." That night, Clara locked every door, closed every curtain, and kept the children in her room. They huddled under blankets while the fog pressed against the walls like something alive. "Why is the house angry, Mum?" Samuel asked. "It's not angry," she whispered. "It's just old." He shook his head slowly. "No, it remembers." Later, when the children finally slept, Clara went to the mirror drawer again. She wanted to look at the photograph one more time, to prove it was real. To prove she hadn't imagined it, but it was gone. In its place lay another photograph. Newer, clearer, the same house, same hill, same fog. But this time, she was standing in front of it. Her, Lily, and Samuel, wearing the same clothes as today. She stared until her throat went dry. The date on the back was written in pencil, September 2nd, 1958. The next morning, something impossible happened. Clara opened the curtains for the first time in days. Sunlight spilled into the room like fire. She had forgotten how bright it could be. She turned to tell the children to look, but they were gone. She found them both in the hallway, crouched against the wall, covering their faces. "It burns." Lily cried, "Mom, close it, please." Clara rushed to shut the curtains again. The moment the light vanished, they stopped screaming. Their skin was pale but unmarked. Samuel looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "You shouldn't let it in," he whispered. "It's what took them away before." "Who?" He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the locked room above. "The family that lived here first." That evening, Clara couldn't bear it anymore. She went back to the phone and tried calling the real estate office again. The line clicked once, then filled with static. Through the noise, she thought she heard a voice say her name. Clara, but stretched out, thin, broken. She slammed the receiver down. When she turned around, the hallway door was open again. In the doorway stood a woman, pale, wearing a long dark dress, her face half in shadow. "Who are you?" Clara managed to whisper. The woman didn't answer. She just looked at Clara with sad eyes and said quietly, "You have to let go. It's our house now." Clara blinked and the woman was gone. Only the fog remained, thick, gray, swallowing the light. That night, Clara dreamt of the photograph again, but this time the faces in it moved. The other mother smiled sadly and said, "We didn't mean to stay. We just never left." When Clara woke, she wasn't sure if she'd opened her eyes at all. The fog never lifted. By now, Clara had stopped waiting for it to. The outside world was gone, replaced by gray silence. Even the trees seemed to have drifted away. Days began to blend into one another, and the clocks no longer kept time. Sometimes she would glance at one and see it frozen at 3:15, and then later it would read 11:40. Though no hours seemed to have passed, she told herself she was tired. That was all, just tired. One afternoon, she found Samuel standing in the upstairs hallway again, near the locked room. His hand was resting on the door as if listening through it. "What are you doing, Sam?" she asked softly. He didn't turn around. "They're talking again." Clara's throat tightened. "Who's talking?" "The others. They keep saying it's their turn now." Clara knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. The wood was cold beneath their fingers. "There's no one in there, love. It's just echoes." He looked up at her, eyes calm, almost pitying. "Mom," he said, "I think we're the echoes." That night, the house grew restless. The radio turned on by itself and stayed on, whispering voices, laughter, footsteps, and sometimes the sound of crying. The bulbs flickered in the hall, and doors that were shut stood open in the morning. Clara couldn't tell if the house was trying to keep them in or let something else out. Lily became paler, quieter. She started sleepwalking, wandering the hallways with her hands stretched out in front of her. Once, Clara followed her into the kitchen and watched as she pressed her palm against the cold window pane, whispering, "I can see them moving in the fog." Clara asked what she saw. Lily just said, "They're afraid of the light too." A few days later, or what felt like days, Clara heard voices downstairs. Real ones, not whispers. A man's voice, steady and low, and a woman's, gentle but uncertain. She crept to the stair landing, heart pounding. From the parlor below came the muffled sound of conversation. "This house feels wrong," said the woman. "It's just old," said the man. "You always imagine things." Clara froze. She knew those voices. They were hers and her husband's, but her husband, David, was gone. He'd died months before the move. Hadn't he? She crept closer and peered around the corner. Two figures stood in the parlor. A young couple she didn't recognize, though something about their movements, their tone, felt painfully familiar. They were solid, real, alive. The woman brushed her hand along the dusty piano. The man said, "I'll call the agent tomorrow. Maybe we can move in next week." The air shimmered faintly around them, like heat rising off a road. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they were gone, swallowed by the gray. Clara stumbled backward, shaking. She clutched the wall for balance. Her breath came short and fast. Were they real people, or had she finally lost her grip on what was real? She went upstairs and found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming softly. When she saw her mother, she said, "You saw them, didn't you?" Clara could barely speak. "Who?" "The new ones. They come and go. They don't know about us yet." "About us?" Clara whispered. Lily nodded slowly. "We used to be like them." That night, Clara dreamt again, though the dream felt more like remembering. She saw their old home, the small city apartment with too much light, too little space. She saw the hospital corridors, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet weeping in waiting rooms. And she saw herself driving through fog, two pale children asleep in the back seat. headlights cutting through the dark. Then, a sudden flash. A scream, a sound like glass and rain and metal tearing. Clara woke with her heart pounding. She couldn't breathe. Her hands were shaking violently. The dream had felt too real. The next morning, the fog was thicker than ever. The walls seemed closer. The air inside the house was damp, heavy. Clara went to the children's room, but the beds were empty. Lily? Sam? Her voice echoed strangely, as if the rooms were farther apart than they should be. She searched the hallway, the kitchen, even the locked room. Nothing. At last, she found them both in the parlor, standing by the piano. The old photograph lay open on the keys. Only this time, there were no faces in it, just empty outlines where people should have been. Lily looked up at her and said very softly, "We don't belong anymore." Clara wanted to scream, to deny it. But the house itself seemed to whisper back, "They never left." The light bulbs popped one by one, plunging the hall into shadow. The radio hissed, and through the static came a voice, not frightened, not cruel, just weary. "You have to let them go." For the first time, Clara realized the voice sounded like her own. That night she sat alone in the dark. The children slept beside her, pale and still, their breathing shallow but peaceful. Clara stared at the photograph one last time, now completely blank, and whispered, "If this is a dream, please let me wake up." But no one answered. Only the wind sighing through walls that might have been hers or someone else's. The night lasted too long, or maybe there was no night at all. Just the same soft gray light, endless and still. The house no longer felt cold. It felt empty, hollow, like something waiting to be filled again. Clara couldn't tell if she was awake or dreaming. She walked the hallways barefoot, listening for the sound of her children's breathing. Sometimes she heard it. Sometimes she didn't. At the end of the hallway, the locked door stood open again. The key dangled from the lock. Clara didn't remember putting it there. She stepped inside. The room was no longer bare. It was warm, lit by a single weak lamp. Dust motes hung in the air like tiny stars, and on the chair, the same wooden chair, sat the woman in the dark dress. Her eyes were soft. Sad. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Clara wanted to scream, but her voice caught. "This is my house." The woman tilted her head. "Is it?" "I thought it was ours." Clara's hands trembled. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Who are you?" The woman stood, and the air seemed to shift around her. "We lived here long ago. We had children, too. Then there was a storm. The light came through the fog, and everything went quiet." She took a step closer. "You came later, Clara. You and your little ones. You didn't know the house was full." Clara shook her head, backing away. "You're lying." "We moved here after the accident." She stopped. Her voice broke. The woman's eyes glistened. Yes, the accident. The memory hit her like cold water. Rain, headlights, the car skidding on a sharp turn. Samuel's frightened cry. Lily's hands reaching out. The trees rushing forward. Then, nothing but fog. Clara fell to her knees. Her breath came in sharp gasps. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be true. We got out. We moved here. I bought this house. I remember." The woman's voice was gentle, almost kind. "You remember what you needed to." Clara's tears burned. "Then what is this place?" The woman looked around, at the walls, the curtains, the still air. A waiting place. For those who haven't realized they're done waiting. Clara stumbled out of the room, down the stairs, calling for her children. "Lily, Sam!" Their voices answered faintly from the parlor. When she reached them, they were sitting on the floor beside the piano. "Mom," Lily said softly, "we saw Daddy." Clara froze. "What?" He was outside, in the fog. He was calling to us, but the light was behind him. He said it's time to go. Samuel looked up at her, calm as ever. "We can't stay here anymore." Clara dropped to her knees, holding them both tightly. "You're not going anywhere without me." They didn't move. They just looked at her, with eyes full of something she couldn't name. Love, maybe, or goodbye. The fog outside began to glow, faintly golden, like dawn trying to break through. The light seeped through cracks in the curtains. It touched the floorboards and the air shimmered. Clara pulled the children closer. "Don't look at it. It hurts you." Lily smiled, small and sad. "It doesn't hurt anymore, Mom." Clara turned toward the window. Through the fog, she could see shapes. people moving slowly, gently toward the light. One of them looked like David. He was reaching out his hand. The woman in the dark dress appeared again by the door. You kept them safe long enough. But this isn't home. Not anymore. Clara's voice broke into a whisper. If I open the curtains, will it stop? The woman nodded. It will set you free. Clara looked at her children. They were holding hands, smiling softly. Lily said, We'll go together, right? Clara's throat tightened. Always. She stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains wide. Light flooded in, not harsh, not burning, but warm. It felt like remembering something you'd forgotten you loved. The fog began to lift, revealing the hill, the valley, the trees, all washed in gold. Clara felt weightless, like breath leaving the body. For the first time, the silence felt peaceful. When the light faded, the house stood empty. The radio was quiet. The mirror showed nothing but dust. Outside, the fog rolled away toward the horizon, and far in the distance, new footsteps echoed. A different family arriving at their new home. After the fog lifted, the hill was silent for a long time. Days passed, or maybe years. The house stood empty, shutters drawn, its white paint fading to a pale gray. Wind moved through the broken windows, carrying the smell of rain and pine. Inside, dust began to settle again, soft as snow. The silence was not empty. It was listening. One bright afternoon, a car stopped at the gate. A young couple stepped out, Emma and Daniel Clark. They stood for a moment, looking up at the old house, its crooked chimneys and wide porch. It's perfect, Emma said. Just needs a little fixing. Daniel nodded. Quiet too. We could use quiet. They carried their boxes inside, laughing softly, their voices echoing through the rooms. The sound made the walls tremble, almost like they were waking up. The air grew warmer. The boards sighed. The house seemed to breathe again. That night, Emma unpacked in what she called the sunroom, even though the sunlight faded quickly behind the trees. She found an old photograph in one of the drawers, a picture of the house long ago, blank faces standing on the porch. She smiled. Look, someone left this here. Daniel glanced over. Creepy. Maybe we should frame it. He shrugged, already busy setting up the lamp. Sure, adds character. The lamp flickered once. Then again. Loose wire, Daniel said. But when he touched the switch, it sparked cold blue for a moment, a light that wasn't from the bulb at all. The air hummed faintly. Emma frowned. Do you hear that? It stopped when she spoke. In the middle of the night, Emma woke to a sound, soft footsteps above her, slow and careful. She turned to Daniel, but he was still asleep. She climbed out of bed, heart beating fast, and followed the sound to the upstairs hallway. It was colder there. The air smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. At the far end stood a door she didn't remember seeing before. Small, wooden, with a brass knob dulled by time. It was locked. She turned away, meaning to go back to bed, but just as she did, something whispered faintly from behind the door. Don't turn on the light. The next morning, Emma found Daniel in the kitchen, pale and quiet. Bad dreams? She asked. He nodded slowly. I dreamt there were children here. A boy and a girl. They wanted me to open the curtains. Emma frowned. Maybe you heard me walking around. I couldn't sleep either. He looked up at her, his voice low. I think the house is still waiting for someone. She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Well, it has us now. But as she turned toward the window, she noticed something strange. Her reflection in the glass seemed to move a fraction slower than she did. Just enough to notice, just enough to make her stop breathing. That evening, as the sun sank behind the fog, Emma lit a candle and carried it up the stairs. The hallway was long, shadowed, and still. She paused near the locked door. The flame flickered. Though there was no draft, somewhere in the quiet, a child's voice whispered, "We didn't mean to stay." The candle went out. Outside, the fog began to creep back up the hill. The pale house stood against the dim sky, still and patient, waiting for another dawn that might never come. Inside, a new radio sat on the counter. It hissed softly, then caught a signal, faint music from somewhere far away. Beneath the music, if one listened closely enough, were the sounds of breathing, and a woman's voice, distant but familiar, saying gently, "You have to let go." The light in the house dimmed. The fog wrapped itself around the hill again, quiet and slow, until only the faint shape of the roof remained. Then there was nothing, only silence. And somewhere deep within that silence, the house began to remember again. End of story. The Pale House, a quiet place for the living.